Hello and welcome to the East Lampeter Township Public Meeting. All participants are now informed that this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is also being offered virtually utilizing Zoom, which is a cloud-based platform for remote video and audio conferencing. The Zoom application is free to the public. The general public is therefore able to join the meeting by connection through the internet or by calling in by phone. The public is also able to observe the meeting on the Township's YouTube channel. Please continue to check the Township website calendar for any updates related to these public meetings. Agendas for these public meetings will also be available on the Township's website. Please be reminded that this meeting is being video and audio recorded and will be posted to the Township's YouTube channel for viewing. The meeting will now proceed with the chairman calling the meeting to order and identifying all other members present in the meeting room and those joining the meeting via Zoom. The chairman will then confirm those members joining by Zoom can be heard.
Welcome to the Monday, May 6th, 2024 meeting of the East Lampeter Township Board of Supervisors. My name is Corey Meyer. I'm joined with Vice Chair Ethan Demme to my left, Supervisor Mike Thornton, and Supervisor Roger Rutt, and Ted Gallagher. Supervisor Ted Gallagher, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Okay. We have agendas in the back of the room. If you can sign in, that'd be great. And please join me in the pledge to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have public comment for non-agenda items only. If you're here for public comment, just come up, share your name and your address to share public comment. Hi. Ethan.
Julie, 365 Enterprise Drive, Birmingham. At last month's meeting, I had made requests that you consider passing a resolution declaring our township to be non-sanctuary. Thus supporting the local police and giving them the authority to reach out to federal agencies in the case of an illegal breaking. Subsequent to my presentation, both Peckway Township and West Earl Township have passed similar resolutions. I'm not certain, I'm certain that there are other ones in the works, but I really don't know the progress to report that to you. So I'm just here to follow up to see if you've considered that, if it's open for discussion or your vote. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Doug Sensnick, 2209 Creek Hill Road. And I was here at the last meeting, brought up the issue of the funding to the language library and asked about possibly withholding those funds until they would do some type of consensus similar to what East Hempfield is pursuing. And just want to follow up and see if you had any discussion on that, any update. If you've given it any consideration or what you expect to in the future at this point.
Sounds good. Any other public comment?
My name is Heather Manier. I work with the 71 The Circle in Lampeter Township. I'm just reiterating that I am for what Victoria was saying and also what Doug was saying. So I just wanted to have it in record that I'm here to support.
Thank you. Any public comment online? Anyone else for public comment? Okay. Any comment from the board?
I'd like to address first comments about it. Sanctuary Township. I was very pleased to know that with our police chief and our standard practice with cooperating as the law says we have to cooperate with federal authorities, immigration, customs enforcement, that we have a very strong relationship with them and will continue to do that. My only hesitation about changing anything would be I want to support that and reinforce the fact that that is the way we expect it to be. And if you were to change anything about that, that would require the board's action to do something that would be extraordinary to what we already do. And we're already doing that. And that stability of us doing that, to me, is a great example. I understand the outward desire to really make a statement that we would not do that, but we haven't and we won't. I would say won't, and I would never vote for anything to change in that relationship. I believe that the other supervisors feel the same way. I won't speak for them, but, and that would be my only hesitation not to, that is something that's popular right now. But I think people are going to do their decision-making at the ballot box, and I think they're going to do it just as they would for the library. And I would actually ask maybe Ethan to explain how we fund that, which is, I think, very instructive on, it's related to my first one.
Yeah. So the current way we fund our libraries, we don't have a physical branch in East Lampeter Township. And so about 8 to 10 years ago, when I joined the board, we passed sort of a resolution allocating our funds to the Lancaster libraries based off of a formula, which is based off of the usage of the residents of East Lampeter Township, how much they use from each library. So currently we give to Manheim Township, Strasburg, Heisler, Pequay Valley, Pequay Library, as well as Lancaster Library, Public Library. So our residents, if they choose to go to the libraries, the relative amount that they go to the libraries is how we've been funding them and how I would recommend we continue to fund them. Per capita, we give about $1.50 per head. So we give quite a decent amount to our public libraries. I'm very supportive of the work that they do in our communities, but it's up to our residents to vote with their feet if they would like to.
Any questions for any of the supervisors or? Yeah, sure, please. Just want to come back up. Better seen and heard.
So, two things. First of all, addressing what you said about not wanting to make a formal statement, but that our police are already involved in taking care of anything that happens. They can call federal agencies. What happens if someone is in our township and they're illegal but they claim they live in Lancaster City? The difference between, do we send them back to Lancaster City because they are, that's where they live and they need to be dealt with the city, or do we actually take care of them here and do what we do as a township?
Chief here right now, but oh, yeah, that's up, Chief. Didn't see you back there. Sorry.
Welcome to answer.
That's a good question. Your name again?
Heather.
So the police department, if we got a complaint of any illegal in the township, and this has happened before, upon the street officer learning that the person's status is in the country illegally, their first order of business would call ICE. And so once immigration gets involved and becomes aware of that situation, those individuals are brought back here, held until ICE sends somebody to pick them up, and they take it from there. We've encountered this before, and we haven't had it happen within the last few months, but if it does happen, I can assure you that that's exactly how they're dealt with. For them to be dealt with differently would be contrary to what our nation's and our state's laws already provide for us, and so that's the reason why we deal with that.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief. Any other public comment? Yeah,
Understand what the risk is of making a statement that you are not sanctuary. What is the risk of the court of law? Is it an amendment to our current laws? Is there extra responsibility on our police behalf? I think it's making a statement that we are not Lancaster City and we are not a sanctuary, and we will cooperate with our wonderful police and also have the ability to contact the federal agencies. I don't see that there's any cost or any risk. Is that incorrect?
My understanding is it costs us our time. If we're passing a resolution, we would like to have our solicitor review it, which bears an additional cost as well. So to me, it's not worth time, the energy, or the expense to curate.
Sure. Rather than prepare for it.
I'm not aware of concern.
any other public comment? Okay, we'll move on. We have four. Yep.
Make a comment about the library. You said vote with your feet. So can you explain what you mean by that? And can you explain what you mean by people are going to come? Is there a resolution in front of the voters to say, hey, we don't want to fund the Lancaster library system, or we want a resolution for illegals? Is there some, vehicle that we don't know of that is happening?
For my comment on voting with your feet is, so we have folks who come to our public meetings and they represent themselves and maybe some of their friends and neighbors. But at the end of the day, what I'm focused on is the data of where our residents go to a library to check out a book. So if our residents continue to go to Lancaster Public Library and check out books, then we will continue to fund Lancaster Public Library relative to the amount of folks who would go to that library. So in other words, so you may choose to not go to the Lancaster Public Library ever again, which is perfectly your right and fine. But your neighbors may say, I would prefer to go to the Lancaster Public Library. They have a fantastic business section. They've got a fantastic autism section for students who need that. It's a great library. I take my kids there, and I'll continue to do so.
Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. We have 4A, we have 6 items.
Can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
I'm sorry about that. Addressing one other part. So Lancaster Library comes every year to ask for money. They're never happy, I think, with what the formula we use. They would like much more money, but even more so now, the funding per use is going to be instructive this year. And as they come before us next year, I can assume there'll be some additional questions about their programming.
Thank you.
Okay, move on to the consent agenda. We have 6 items. 4A, approval of the May 6th, 2024 Board of Supervisors meeting agenda. We have 4B, approval of minutes of the Monday, April 15th, 2024 regular meeting. We have C, request for reduction of financial security, Sundance Car Wash, Land Development Plan 2128. Located at 1728 Lincoln Highway East. Applicants requested a reduction for financial security for the sewer portion of the project. The authority engineers provided a letter recommending a full release of the remaining financial security in the amount of $34,325.77, leaving zero balance for the sewer portion of the project. There still will be a security for the site front improvements. We have 4D, request for reduction of financial security, Legacy Manor Stormwater Management Plan 2311, which is at 441 Mount Sydney Road. And applicants requested a reduction. The engineer has inspected and they're recommending a $0 release. So current balance will stay at $16,786. We have 4E, time extension for council review and action for High Garden Stormwater Management Plan 2408, Greenfield William Penn Way. And applicants offering a time extension for review and action. And they've offered a time extension to August 20th, 2024. And this is their first time extension for that plan. And then we have approval of pay invoices from all funds. The total of $601,261.71. There are 4 items of note. $179,462.50 to Her Signal and Lighting for the Green Light Go project. We have $16,310 to McMahon Associates Bowman for the Strasburg Pike Trail project. $8,925 to CS Davidson for permit manager configuration and training. And $8,669.72 to HRG for the Willow Road culvert engineering. Is there anyone here for any of the consent agenda items? Okay.
I'll make a motion. Yeah,
Okay.
motion.
Second by Mike. Any comment from the board or the public? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, number 5 on the agenda, we have an appeal hearing regarding suspension from a non-preference tow list, absolute towing. Is anyone here for that item? Okay, Chief, you're here. Okay. So we will open up the hearing for absolute towing for the appeal hearing. If you want to give us some background on this.
Sure. In early April this year, Chief Survey issued a letter to Absolute Towing, suspending them from the non-preference tow list. The non-preference tow list is used by the police department to determine which towing operator will be called in the event there's a crash and the owner of the vehicle that needs to be towed has no preference for who is used. They either aren't able to say, or they just don't have a preference. So then we have a process whereby if you're on the non-preference tow list, the officers go through that process and determine which companies to be called. And that goes on a rotating basis. Due to violations of the non-preference tow policy, Chief suspended them, issued them a letter suspending them from the non-preference tow list. And in accordance with the policy, the tow operator has the opportunity to appeal that suspension, which they did receive their appeal. And the policy called for the board to have a local agency hearing to hear the appeal and ultimately make a decision on the suspension.
Appellant is not here.
Apparently not. They did receive notice.
And we do realize there was a special circumstance with absolute towing. The individual who owned absolute towing did pass away in between receiving the appeal and us setting the hearing.
That's correct.
Yeah. So we're sorry to hear that news. You have a question? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, would it be reasonable to continue the meeting until our next meeting and then give the applicant time to respond at a later date?
Yeah, I would be open to that.
Make a motion to continue this hearing until our next regular scheduled Board of Supervisors meeting.
Motion was made by Ethan, seconded by Roger. Any comment to close the hearing and to continue the hearing until our next scheduled Board of Supervisors meeting, which is May 20th? If I'm not mistaken, correct? Okay. Any other comment from the public?
Yes. One thing, there was in the paper that the owner of Absolute Towing passed away.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, we're aware. Yeah, so we're hoping that maybe a family member would come to the next hearing. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. And if you can just, staff can reach out and please let them know that the hearing would be. Right. Thank you, Chief. I don't know if you're staying, but or you're going. Thank you. Okay, 6, we have a request for informal discussion regarding zoning amendment for manufacturing in Village General Zone, Mill Creek Fence, 2498, Philadelphia.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Supervisors. My name is Dwight Yoder, attorney at Gibble Crable & Hess, and thank you for putting us on the agenda. We've been talking a bit with township staff, and as you know, any request for a zoning change is considered a legislative decision within the purview of the elected officials to decide as a policy matter. My experience is it's always better to come to the folks who are going to make the decision before we get too far along, so that if there's any changes or feedback, we kind of get that up front, because one of the concerns I have is you go through the process and then somebody says, oh, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you do that? And then we have to start the process over if we make a change. So tonight is just to give you an update on where we're at and to see if we can get a little feedback from the supervisors. I do have a handout with me, Dave Byler and his son, and they, as you know, they own Mill Creek Fencing. Randy Daltrick, the engineer, is here as well if there's any questions. We have a sketch plan for the site that's pretty rough, but we think it's good for you to just see kind of some of the ideas we're thinking about. But we'll kind of go over that quickly. And what I'd really like to do is just get your feedback on some of the things that we've been talking about in terms of what the changes might look like for the Village General District. So with that, let me hand this out and we'll try and get to it. That's kind of a little outline there with
Talk to you as much as
okay. I'll try and put some of this up for you if possible. You probably will see it. I'll try and be as descriptive as possible. I thought I would just essentially just give you a little background. I'm sure everybody knows Mill Creek Fencing. The first page here just shows you a little bit, and you know from my letter that they're a family-owned business. They've been in the township since 1991. They're out of space, nothing new for successful Lancaster County businesses. We're seeing this across the county. You're seeing businesses that need more space and they can't find space to grow. And it's not just in East Lampeter, it's everywhere. And it's a real problem. And I appreciate, I think, this board has been in touch with that issue and has tried to find ways to keep their businesses in the township, allow them to grow. So certainly appreciate that mindset. And in this case, as you can see from the second tab, which is an aerial shot of the property that really two parcels at the corner of 340 and 896 in your Village General District. This is the parcel that they have purchased and where they'd like to be able to move their business, construct a new building. They really don't do manufacturing, but the way the ordinance is written, they fall under kind of the generic manufacturing terminology. So even though it's fabrication, where they're putting stuff together, I'm thinking stuff comes in and then you put it together there. The existing ordinance, and you can see the second page here, just as kind of a blow up of the zoning map. And it shows that parcel there in the Village General District. So if you go to the third tab, the reason that we're here is because the way the township zoning ordinance is written for the Village General District, if you look at 13 there at the bottom, it says manufacturing uses are allowed in the village general district, and then there's some parameters between 2 and 10 acres, limited to 30,000 square feet. So there's already some parameters put on the size and the scope, but then it has to be located along a road owned and maintained by East Lampeter Township. That's the rub. And I understand in having some discussions with township staff that there is a reason for that. There's some history to that, as there is with any zoning ordinance. I think it maybe started in the Bird and Hand District, if I understand it. And the idea was to kind of allow smaller businesses, kind of an incubator area to develop. Is that right there? Yeah.
That is correct.
So we understand. Appreciate that the language was put in there maybe for that reason. Obviously here, 396 are state roads, right? So, and they did try to get the zoning hearing board. The zoning hearing board said, hey, you don't meet the requirements for a variance, which we understand. So they denied it. So really the only option now is to try and figure out how we can massage the ordinance in a way that, it's acceptable to the supervisor and the township staff to allow this to proceed. And before we talk about that, let's quickly look at the sketch so you get a sense. And that's kind of number 4. And like I said, clear that this is early on. They haven't done too much other than try and put some boxes on the page and show you what they're thinking. But in consultation with township staff, it sounds like what the township is interested in seeing is some type of kind of mixed use where you're having some, we're looking at townhouses here. And we'll explain a little bit why we think that might be more appropriate than apartment buildings. That if you kind of integrate some of that into a manufacturing facility, and I hate to use that term because that's not what we're talking about, but if you change the text amendment, you're not just changing it for this property, right? You're changing it for every property that would have this kind of issue in your village general. So I hear this all the time. We like what you're doing, but I'm not quite sure what's going to happen down the road. So you always have to be kind of thinking down the road. So in this case, it's a pretty straightforward, I think, approach. I know there was some discussion that there's a waterway across the properties. So the existing property that faces 340. There is a water course and an easement that would need a bridge to cross it. But in looking at this, it made a lot of sense to kind of put that residential hub there on the corner, and then have the parking. These would be townhouse units, and then you would have the Mill Creek fencing facility more towards the west. And there's some movement that could be done here. And there's also an area there on the south side that could potentially have some future development as well. But that is generally the concept. And we're open to having some integrated residential units into the process. So I think conceptually, we're all kind of on the same page. I think the reason we wanted to come tonight was to get some feedback on some of the specifics, because there's different ways to skin a cat. In this case, there's all kinds of different ways. So I just put some bullet points to represent what I see as the kind of the minimalist approach to the more comprehensive approach, however you wanted to, and the easiest thing to do is just simply to remove the requirement of a township road. Now, what that means is there's no guarantee you're going to get any housing, right? Yeah. If you just say, hey, we're going to just delete that provision, it's the simplest because you just delete it, but you don't necessarily require then any type of residential housing. The next one would
It could also have impact for the Bird and Hand District, like you just described with.
That's right. So there could be, and there could be some other properties in the Smoketown area that could affect as well. So, another option would be, and it's kind of similar, and I wasn't crazy about this option, but I'll share it, which is this road here, that could be a cul-de-sac that would be dedicated to the township. Then you don't have to change your ordinance at all. I mean, you're fronting on a township road, right? So another, but township wants to take on a new cul-de-sac township road, maybe not. And then the third kind of simplistic approach is to essentially modify the ordinance language to say that manufacturing uses can be along the private that meets the township standard. So it essentially says, we're going to meet the township road requirements, but it doesn't have to be a township road, which I think, I'm not quite sure where that to the Bird-Hand district kind of approach, but it's getting a little bit closer where the township's not undertaking a new road, but there is limitations that you can't just put it right on along a state road. And then the final point, but that was essentially the feedback we got from township staff, which was to create a mixed use, if we want to, I'm not quite sure what we would call it. That would be to allow manufacturing along any road. There'd be no limitation, but it would be subject to including residential as part of that development. So it would be a mixed use request that would include the manufacturing component and the residential component that would have to be approved simultaneously. So you would get your housing out of it and you would get the manufacturing out of it. So that is kind of where township staff landed. We, I think, are open to that approach. There was a few criteria that I think we may come out a little differently than township staff on, particularly the 60% of the maximum residential density. I had done just a little calculations on that. So in your village general, if you use an apartment building, you need to have a minimum of 3,500 square feet for a multifamily use. 1 acre is 43,560. So your density, your maximum density in the village general is 12 dwelling units per acre. And the suggestion here is that we go at 60%, which would be 7. And when you take 9 acres, you're looking at putting 65 units on not the area that is going to be for the this, you're putting it there. So that's like what Charter Homes is voting along Route 30. That's a 3-story complex with 30 units. I think they're actually doing 24 in each building. Probably not what you want in your Smoketown village general, but I think the township staff makes a good valid point that there should be some requirements for density so that somebody doesn't put 2 townhouses or a semi up and they say that's it. So I think that is the one thing. Now, what was proposed would be if you don't meet that density, you could come to the supervisors for conditional use approval. So it's not like you're out of luck altogether. There's a, I will say that we received some feedback from some neighbors about concern about residential. And again, I do this enough to know that neighbors come out all the time now. So that's just kind of the name of the game. Everybody wants to continue to look at things as a farm field. So that doesn't concern me too much, but I think you should just be aware that, that's, that might be coming at a hearing down the road if we have to go to a hearing. In addition, there's some discussion here about architectural features. And in talking to the Pachantera about this, I think their concern is that you want to be sure, since it's in your village general district, that you are integrating that facade into the village general district. My only question was, with this property specifically, you're sitting kind of tucked away behind there. And so, while we certainly are open to maybe some facade that takes off the edge of a kind of an institutional industrial use, it's not like you're sitting up on 340 or 896. So there could be some tweaking there to establish that. The landscaping, the parking for all uses should be located to the rear of the structures. We would suggest probably, for the manufacturing use, that might be appropriate. It's a little hard to know, like with this sketch, the rear along 340, you might need to screen some of that parking so when you drive down you don't see it. But I think if there's some flexibility built in, and we need to go to a hearing and the supervisors have some discretion to modify it for a specific site, that seems to be a reasonable approach. But let me stop there and see if Randy or David or anyone here has any input or thoughts on it.
The main thing is just the same thing as what you're saying. We've been full with this for a year and 3/4 now, haven't got anywhere whatsoever. So the reason for this tonight is if the supervisor say we don't want nothing to do with that in this area, then we need to find another location outside of East Lampeter City. And we do have a couple of locations we can go to that'll be out of East Lampeter, which we can do. But we wanted to make sure that we have all our T's crossed and I's dotted on this one before we go elsewhere. If we go elsewhere, this is going to be a high density area. We already have a person that can do that.
Yeah, understood, Davey. Thank you. And thanks, Dwight, for the explanation.
Sure.
Has Township seen this new four yet? Have you seen?
I think that's new. We've seen something similar.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
There it was rotated and
Okay.
Well, and the reason for that, to reduce the cost. So, I mean, that was basically, but I think for feedback, rotating is an efficient use of.
Yeah.
So.
And I appreciate you guys coming from us having a conversation. I think it's a good approach, and I think you gave a great explanation to what you're trying to do. I personally would love to figure out a way to keep you guys in the township and make this work while protecting the rest of the village general. As often is the case, you make a decision here, not thinking about the broader implications. So again, thanks for coming in front of us. I'd love to hear feedback from the board to give to the applicant about this informal discussion.
So, David, you don't have any problem with whatever housing requirement we come up with?
Well, what we have on this proposal is something that's really feasible. And I don't think the neighborhood's gonna have a big problem with that because we're going, instead of apartments, townhouses. I don't know, Sam, the neighbor here, I don't know what his opinion would be on that. If this is the first that he's seen the townhouse thing versus apartments. We originally had more in there, but we had a lot of feedback from neighbors, and we found that we're neighbors all upset before we ever get there. We don't want to be there. It's all upset. So that's why we figured we're going to try to appease what the township wants in a somewhat that we can still operate and neighbors will not be driving with the upset.
Yeah.
That's
Sam,
really,
you have, I'll put you on the spot.
I just want to say, I guess I ask a question, within Village General, does that actually allow housing? So this, with your density that you were talking about, I think this would be more feasible for the township, for the public, and for the safety of your residents. We all know housing creates traffic. I think most of us are pretty local. We know what 896 340 intersection looks like on a business day. Can we control the amount of traffic? I don't think we totally can. But I think if you control your density, like the attorney was saying, I would be in favor of that. more so than developing the whole thing and creating a lot more traffic.
In this version, just on the structure of the townhouse, how tall are they?
Randy, can
We
you,
just laying them out as units. We didn't even get to the height. We were just trying to figure out by the code, by the ordinance, how many we had to have in for that area. I would assume it'd be 2 stories.
Standard townhouse, doors are usually right around 24 feet. Just roughly, right in that area.
Questions from the board, feedback?
Corey,
Yeah, Ted.
so I would just say that, I don't want to see any businesses leave our township. They're the backbone of our township. So I would love to see the board and the staff find a way to make this project work.
Thanks, Ted. Mike?
Well, I live,
Right down the street.
right down the street, and I see that traffic at that intersection every day, as you folks do. Is a major hurdle here going to be PennDOT's study of that location for their driveway?
Just like it is with every other project that involves a state highway.
Significant?
Well, we had a consultant look into that already, just in general, look at it, because they were trying to go out on 340. We couldn't do that at all because of the site distance and how close the building is. This one we can, but we might just have to do a little bit of shoulder right along there. Local file 896, but we did look at that, and that is the most easiest way to do it for them, safest. It will be by 10 inch walls, it kicks us right into the low line we can't use. So the whole low line drive.
And that driveway is also, obviously, truck traffic is going in.
Yes.
Is your larger truck a standard tractor trailer? Just truck that will have to get back there, a standard tractor trailer?
I think we had, what did we have in there, Randy? An average of 10, 5. You made one for terrible. It's not a lot, but there is tractor trailers. That brings our deliveries into it. We don't have tractor trailers taking stuff out. It's delivery coming in.
Got it. So raw coming in.
One resident had already asked about expected noise at the manufacturing site. Can you comment to that?
Yeah, there won't hardly be any noise outside the building. Right. You'll have forklifts and that kind of stuff, but other than that, that's it. Truck.
I mean, fabrication can mean a lot of things. Do you do mostly cutting of raw materials?
We use with like standard chop saws, standard construction rollers, that will be inside. So you have movement outside of the section of, diesel trucks, forklifts.
Do you use like plasma cutters, that sort of thing, or no?
Questions?
I like the direction that staff's going with that mixed use development. I think mixed use makes the most sense, given it's a village area and having a mix of housing and manufacturing. I'm open to adjusting some of those density requirements or designating the calculation based off of the actual amount of the lot we're disturbing, because there is a lot of open space on this. So that might be a way to calculate that density. I'd like to see more density than 20 units. But I think we're moving in the right direction. So if it's one way, ideally, if we can draft an ordinance that gives flexibility on how we calculate that density requirement and do it by right, that's ideal. But if we need to have some conditional use in there to get to that.
I do appreciate the township staff had a safety valve, which was the conditional use, which was, hey, come to you if you don't meet it. I just think the original threshold, and I understand, you're trying to meet that, that density requirement, and I get it. I just, when we started running the numbers and looking at the site and understanding that you go down 340, it's a lot of single family. You go down 896, it's a lot of single families. Does it make sense to capture all your density right here? Probably not. So I think there's some maybe additional discussion that we can have, even if we still end up needing to come for a conditional use hearing. because we don't quite meet that threshold. I think if you're gonna do this, put in a number that is reasonably able to be obtained in the future for maybe another property. You know, maybe that's based on the square footage of the manufacturing. So you need so many units for the size of the building you're putting up. It's capped at 30,000. So there's different ways you could go at that. I mean, I think at this point, this is about what we're prepared to commit to in terms of the number of units. So we're likely going to need to come back because that density is not going to even meet probably a reduced level. I just think maybe we can reduce it for others down the road so it's done correctly to start with. So, and I will say, I appreciate township staff. They were very responsive and helpful and gave us good feedback. I mean, you don't always agree with everything, but they came up with some good ideas, so I do appreciate that.
One other piece of feedback would be, and something to keep in mind is, so there was a recent development we did in the last couple of years on 340 called the Villas. The angle of a couple of those the townhouse units on the front sort of faced the road. Parking was in the rear, and then you move back and there was some on the side. And
So maybe
right in
some of these so they face.
I think swinging some of these to where they face the road gives it that feel, and then there's a path along the front of it that connects, and it fits right in with the neighborhood, which has single family homes on both sides. And when that went in, we had very little, if any, negative response from the neighbors. So, you know, take a drive past that one and look at it and go, because that's a few more units than you have here, not many.
That's actually one facility we were looking at when we went to townhouses here, because we like the layout.
Yeah, they did a nice job. Yeah, I was going to ask some more questions just about parking and the architectural design, because they were able to, you know, make it look nice on 340. So,
and then most of the parking you flagged in, and it was all in the back there.
I mean, the setback there, I mean, sometimes, and I don't know the ordinance that well to know in your village general, but sometimes you can push up a bit closer to keep the visual as you go down the streetscape so that it's consistent with some of the, I mean, most of the houses, at least on the south side of 340, would be pretty close to 340.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much on the north side, but we'll have to look at that. I don't know if there's a provision that if we rotate that, it makes sense to me that a little bit closer to 340 would actually feel better in terms of a village kind of, you know, area than more of a commercial area. So, yeah.
Right, if I remember correctly, there's minimum and maximums for the frontage.
Okay, so we'll take a look at that. Yes. All right, so what I hear you say, maybe if we can swing those units around so that the front faces 340 and maybe adjust the parking, I think that's helpful information.
And it's the question, the way you have the layout right now, you have this big sort of pocket behind there that seems unusable. Is there potential? We have one area up front where it's a potential future development. Is there a way to maybe make it so the whole parcel is more accessible, or if you're planning on not using it, what would be the use of that? Would just remain farmland? Or
I don't think they know yet. I think we were trying to kind of put a line where the manufacturing would be and we didn't spend too much time on how those buildings would be positioned. So my sense is you get to the edge of that parking lot and you go west, and that's like your manufacturing area. You know, these buildings may actually rotate, but I agree with you, there's an area in the back. We're gonna have to go with stormwater somewhere. So there's some other things here. I'm like 99% sure that the plan you're seeing now ultimately will be changed because, you know, so I agree with you. We don't want to leave unused space that could be better developed. So to me, I would just say you take that, you go west, that's kind of the manufacturing. To me, that makes a lot of sense with just this configuration because you don't want to put townhouses to the west there, and you're driving through the, so.
Yeah.
And I think then to the east and the future development would be potentially additional, residential. But I guess that would be to be determined, so.
Yeah, you were summarizing, before you finished summarizing, any feedback from staff?
No, I'm glad to hear that we're all sort of getting close to the same page and, look forward to seeing an amendment proposal, and we will respond quickly and get it on your agenda as quick as we can.
I agree. Good. Anything else, Dwight?
I don't think so. Good?
Yeah.
Appreciate so much.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Next on the agenda, we have 7 new business supervisor discussion items, housing plan implementation. I just want to off and then we'll. As well.
Was heard and ultimately adopted by the board in March. Am I remembering that correctly? Recently. And since that time, township staff has been looking at the recommendations of the plan and trying to come up with ideas on how to implement the plan. Our focus, candidly, has been on the goal of the plans, and the statement in the plan is that in addition to the units that are known, that are planned and approved already, we need another 720 units in the next 5 years. So we were trying to look at the recommendations made in the plan, as well as any additional ideas that we could come up with that would hopefully get us to that goal of 720 in 5 years. A lot of the recommendations in the plan we feel are good. There are some that we don't feel are as good or worth putting as much energy into, especially with that 5-year window of trying to get things done quickly to hit that number. So we prepared a memo, provided it to the board, and sort of summarizing, I would say that the first thing to do is going to be to add multifamily housing in the R2 zone by right. That's going to generate, we feel, the largest opportunity to add units quickly. The other zoning changes that are recommended in the plan having to do ADUs, zone changes, reducing townhouse and multifamily lot area requirements, and getting all those by right, are all things that, as we're making changes to the zoning ordinance, we might as well try to do most of those along with that change so that they can be.
Yeah.
I do think that once that's accomplished, leading up to that being accomplished, we are going to have to reach out to property owners and try to establish relationships, give them information on what is in the ordinance once it's changed, and attempt to motivate them toward being willing to begin the development process of their property. We can change everything in the zoning ordinance, and if none of the property owners want to do those things, we don't hit the number of housing units that we're trying to hit. So that is an effort that's going to have to be put in. The other thing that was recommended by the plan, and we certainly agree with, is that we have ADUs, additional dwelling units. Sorry, accessory dwelling units in the ordinance, but there hasn't been a lot of uptake on that concept. So we are going to need to do some more promotion. We're going to have to get that information out there and try to motivate homeowners and, as well as builders and those that are in that industry to be aware that ADUs are an option and that, they can do them in Peter by right. And we think that'll move that needle more quickly to get us to the number. So, Sarah, anything you want to add that I've missed?
I think we listened to the board. Ethan raised the concept of putting the ADUs in the ag zone, and we think that's a good one. If we looked at it as all of those that are under 10 acres, so not serving as a current farm, and applying for ADUs in those areas. So that's basically everything that's a residence, like across the street from Ethan's house. There's some other minor zoning issues that we can address that we've been told by some developers would significantly increase density in mixed use, and I think those are all worthwhile opportunities.
Discussed in this paper?
No, they're in here.
Oh, they're in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the memo. Really well done, and you definitely listened. I know, Ethan, you have a few more. Do you want to go next and just? Yeah.
I'll walk through just to sort of summarize what staff put together. I think is fantastic work. I agree with all of their recommendations. And then there's a few that I think we could discuss and go a little bit further. And I think one of the key points is the housing plan recommended 700 units, which represented taking 5% of our commuter traffic and trying to build housing that would hopefully those folks would choose to live closer to where they were. And 700 units in 5 years, I think, is an aggressive goal. But I'm looking a little bit further out and saying, I think the comments from Todd of Forward Planning when he said, when I asked what is a good number to have as our commuter target, he said, 75, 80% is sort of a healthy, we're at 94%. So if we went straight to 75%, that would be 3,750 new units. Definitely not going to do that in 5 years. So if I look at 10 plus, 10 to 20 years, that's the pipeline I'd like to start to build. Is we want that slow, steady, incremental growth in our township around our existing infrastructure where we already have public transit and where people are already going to work. So we've got our greenfield area, we've got our manufacturing high steel, we've got our tourist zone with a lot of services, and then we have a lot of rural jobs like the one we were just discussing here. So we've got a lot of great jobs that are good middle income, lower middle income jobs based off of the data presented. So we need to make sure that housing is more affordable to those folks. So workforce housing is what is the target. So we have our short-term goal, but I really encourage us to look a little longer and say, what can we put in place now that down the road can get there? And when I look at some of the recent zoning amendments we've made, we amended the Greenfield Business Park Zone, added more units. They came with a plan. They're working that plan from when we made the zoning change to when the doors in those apartments opened. 7 years. Yeah, a good 7 years. Rockville is another one. We approved the zoning change. Took a while to find the right developer who was looking at it. Took 3 developers, and then finally we have one. They're working through it. There's challenges with that side as well, whether it's their plan, and they're working very closely with staff to try to figure that out. So once we make the zoning change to when we have a new housing unit, usually is 5+ years. So some of these zoning changes, I think the R2 change, we could get some, be easier to do some development in some of those areas. One of my recommendations in our commercial zone, I would see that one probably taking a little longer to get developers who are interested. Those are some bigger projects. So real quick, the promotion of the creation of accessory dwelling units and some recommendations, a few other ways that I'm happy to help out with. I think those are pretty simple. I think the 10 acres for the ag zone is a good step because it is one of farms less than 10 acres. But it is one of any residential area in any home in a farm. Currently, we allow an echo unit. Um, Basically, the recommendation would be if you allow an accessory dwelling unit, you can just rent that current unit out to someone who is unrelated to you. So the biggest one is sort of looking at this, saying, let's remove that restriction on renting out that unit to someone who's not related to you. So I would recommend that we actually approve, you basically, if you have one house on a farm, you can add one accessory unit. So we're not putting apartment buildings on farms. We're just saying if you have one house, you can add one accessory.
It'd be easier to get feedback on each of these individually.
Sure.
Okay, so.
My accessory dwelling is in the ag zone.
Yeah.
Staff has under 10 acres, and I'm recommending any unit can have one additional unit.
Thoughts from the board first on that one? I don't have a problem with that. Oh, sorry.
Did you say why,
Yeah, I guess,
why not? Why not larger than that?
There's a number of farms that have echo units already. And we did discuss this with Ethan, and we didn't know if he was including those or not.
So echo.
So I believe it's an or, correct me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's septic concerns,
Yes, you
or
have to meet.
in some cases actually hook up to public sewer. So echo units do not pay a hook to public sewer. That would not be the case with an ADU.
Absolutely.
So there are some things that we need to just be sure that we're moving along the same lines.
Yeah, I would assume that they would have to meet all those other standards plus payment of hooking up.
Which are current, in our ordinance, just to clarify, we call them accessory apartments, but it's an ADU.
Yeah.
So our current ordinance ADUs already are required to meet existing sewer regulations and pay for a hookup.
Yeah.
So it would basically be extending the current regs into the ag zone. But yes, it would be echo unit or not echo unit and.
Yeah.
I think it's a good clarification.
Yeah, good. Other thoughts from staff on that one? Other thoughts from the board on that one? Okay, you're in favor. Okay, great. Move to the next one. Thank you.
And then the other one is, and this is very similar to staff's recommendation of accessory units with religious uses, which I think is a great idea. I expanded it to accessory dwelling units with a primary use. And there's very few properties that meet this, but for example, if you're in some of our village zones and you have a village residential, if you have a primary use that's not single family housing and it's a large parcel, but your neighbors are all single family houses that can put an ADU in the backyard, this would allow that, whether it's, that could be a hair salon, a chiropractor, a post office, a dentist, anything that's currently allowed as your primary use, this would allow you to put one ADU in the back as if you were a residential unit. Again, I don't think it reaches that many properties, but it's just another way of saying you could put one in there, because the impact would be the same as if they converted that primary commercial use, if you will, into a single family, then they could add an ADU there.
Comments from staff on that one first. I just want to hear just any concerns. Tara.
It really would affect the VR because it's allowed in all of the other village districts.
Okay.
And so when I looked at the properties in the VR, it's 2 properties. So if we're talking about 484 units total as a potential here. So yes, like Ethan said, it doesn't move the needle.
No.
It allows for those 2 properties to put in 2 ADUs a piece, because that's what our current ordinance allows, is 2 ADUs per non-residential use.
Yeah, and that's village residential, which is where, yeah. Okay. So not a huge impact, but cleans things up and makes things.
Basically, it says it's village residential is essentially the same as village general for ADUs for the primary use.
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion is I wouldn't go out of our way to change our zoning ordinance to do that, but if we're making other changes and, sort of have it open, I would be fine with making that update. Other thoughts from the board?
because it's not a large number. I guess my concern, I think the positive with having the ADU is that you're living in the same location, even in Echo. It's people that are very familiar with the people who are renting, as opposed to, well, it's not a residential, it's, so. But since it's so small, I don't think it really.
I hear you.
Makes a significant difference.
Any other thoughts? Okay, keep going.
All right, next one's probably the most discussion we'll have, but so this is basically allowing housing in our commercial 2 zone. So our commercial 2 zone on the map behind us is it's the, I forget which color of pink it is. It's the slightly lighter pink.
Yeah, it's a lighter pink, so it's on the left side of. Yeah, so give us some places that are in that
So
area.
basically, we're to Lancaster Mennonite fleet.
Yeah.
It does not include the
Wawa.
It does not include the Walmart's in.
Wawa's in
the
here,
Wawa, the former Howard Johnson's,
Yeah.
Friendly's.
Friendly's, the Lancaster Mennonite complex that in the front portion of the property, and then across the street, Mr. Car Wash over to the property just prior to Volleyball Corner. And then those properties in the mid.
Yeah.
Yes.
Highways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hotel in there and
It's a bunch of
car lot.
Yeah, auto is absolute towing there. Or the other, yeah. Okay.
So the concept there, and as a visual, I would say what we have currently in Bridgeport next to Hack would be sort of an ideal candidate to copy and paste into a parcel there that would like to redevelop it.
You mean the retail on the bottom?
So retail, commercial on the first floor, a couple stories of apartments on top, sort of that mixed use where we're both maintaining the commercial aspect of the area, but also adding in that zoning that allows for you to go vertical and add some housing. And it's bordered by our residential 3 districts to the north and south. So the neighborhoods to the north and south already allow that level of density. So it'd be more of just extending that housing opportunity into that zone. Again, it's one of, I don't foresee, a giant land rush of developers to come into there, and maybe they'll look at it and say, no, it's not a good place for apartments. Great. It's one of, I view it as let's open it up, let the market decide what we should do with it, as opposed to saying, here's what we don't want to do. But if someone came in with a proposal to do some housing there, I think we should make it easy for them to do that.
We'll pause there. That's okay. Great.
Some, in the Bridgeport complex, that apartment, I think they were coming back with negative reports of how popular that is with business at being a commercial hub. That
Retail business.
A retail
Yes,
business.
they added then.
Did they explain why? Anybody remember why they were saying that?
I don't recall an actual reason.
Just
They did approve a reason or a zoning amendment that allowed storage within the building first floor because they were finding that their residents didn't have enough space in their apartments to store their belongings.
It's a response to not getting lights on.
Right, but there's also a fitness center in there and there's something else in there and it's eluding.
With the training or something like
So I think
that.
we extended fitness things, and bakery was another use. So we added several uses that they requested to add, which I think makes sense, but they have not had a problem filling those apartments.
So issues with making that change as you see it in your experience?
Well, I think Ethan's correct. We're not going to get uptake that concept in that area. A lot of those properties are long-term. You've got the state police and PennDOT are 2 of the bigger sites there. I don't think those are going to change over. So for me, I wouldn't put any energy into this at this point in time. It's just, we're not gonna get an uptake of units, especially in the next 5 years, to make that happen.
I mean, really, these changes are happening simultaneously with the streetscape. Over the years that they would actually be having an impact.
I'm not sure.
Roughly, well, I mean, the streetscape, you know, the years that each year that we're moving forward with different elements of it. We're looking at the same changes that are roughly, you're looking at some developer to come in creatively and say, oh, there's a parcel I didn't think about before. And does the streetscape project change the attractiveness of somehow this? I guess that's my point.
Oh, well, we certainly think it'll change the attractiveness of the corridor, generally. And, you know, hope that, you know, the properties that, need some redevelopment will in fact redevelop. That's not just for the C2 area, but, you know, the C3 area as well. But I wouldn't condition doing the streetscape improvements only if uses change. We need to do those streetscape improvements.
No question. I guess I was thinking, is that some factor a developer's going to bring in? Even though they're not the best properties there, I'm going to drive there right after the meeting again and take a better look at, you know, what you're talking about, but.
Yeah,
I would tend.
Yeah, Ted.
I would say I would tend to agree with Ethan. I think that there are several of the nuisance hotels that, you know, fall within that district. And it might be a viable opportunity to have somebody purchase that property and do something that actually looks decent, causes less, you know, problems for our police.
Yeah, thanks, Ted.
So
Yeah, Brian.
I think all of us have no idea what housing is going to look like in 10 years or what the demand is. Mm-hmm. So I think my personal opinion on changing the uses is to basically take properties like that, I mean, zoning districts like that, and make it mixed use. You know, the baby boomers, the people my age, I mean, we're going to explode over the next 10, 15 years. We don't know what the residential care communities or anything, how they're going to respond, but they're going to need space to do build outs and change how people are living in retirement, things like that. So I think zoning districts like this should be opened up and then let the market drive whatever responsible building projects into those zoning districts.
The only other comment I'll make is that part of what's on staff's mind is that we are about to go into a comprehensive planning process as well. And so, you know, again, our perspective on the housing plan was, you know, we've got this 5-year number put in front of us. The comp plan is going to take a look at a much longer time frame than that. And so going through that process might help to inform this issue as well as many other issues.
Yeah, I think the comprehensive plan is key. I would look at our housing study and these recommendations as guidance for staff as we go into that process of directionally where we'd like to go. Regarding whether developers are interested or not, I mean, I've had at least 2 developers that I've talked to that have expressed interest in our commercial 2 zone. Whether or not if we make the change, they would be ready to move right away, I don't know. But it's one of, there is interest. Once we make the change, we'll see how, if any of that materializes.
Mm-hmm. It would fit into maximize already developed property. Do not take new land. Mm-hmm. That might be more attractive to somebody, but if it's going to fit that efficiency that they need and the density, and you know, I just think that whole corridor is going to look so much better. I'm
open to it. I think, we have a property there that has been fenced in now for 3 or 4 years. Yeah, and I would say underutilized many years prior to that. I mean, it was a running hotel, but, and, East Town Mall, just to the west of it, has had substantial turnover over the years, of retail spaces. We just agreed to allow for storage units, right, in that property. I'm not sure if that's moving forward or not, or.
It's not.
Yeah, so, my feeling is open it up from a zoning perspective and see what happens. We could be wrong, right? People could, and the conversations you have could come to fruition quicker than we think. So, I appreciate the comprehensive plan. But to Ted's point as well, there's definitely some problem areas in that district, in that zoning district. So I'd be open to it.
Yes, the one thing that I said before that I thought was making me resist, actually, I could turn it around in that, developers saying, at least in my experience, we don't really care about your zoning. We look at market and what do we need? And we go look for it. Then we'll come to you as we've experienced, and we will change as we need. However, they're not coming. Right now it's not happening. Could you create some incentive that might get a little bit of attraction? So
Yeah.
I guess I have to look at it that way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't stand in the way of that.
Would the board weigh in on whether or not that's something that you want township staff to work on sooner rather than later, or have the other, I'm not going to say easier, but simpler changes to the zoning ordinance done with the upcoming amendment? Because it's not as easy as just taking out the mixed use and putting it in the C2.
Sure. Yeah. Go please.
My opinion would be like the smaller modifications with our ADUs, I think would make sense to fit in our upcoming amendment that we have. I would probably put the commercial zone into the next set of amendments. So not try to shoehorn it in right away, but I would put it on the list of our next time we're looking, because that will take which parts of the C1 zone and which parts of the mixed use zone do you want to reuse as the model into the C2 zone, or a combination thereof. So I agree that would be a little more complicated. I wouldn't want to try to push it in the one way I want on deck.
Yeah, and I'm fine for staff to come back to us, next meeting and say, hey, based on, what you heard from the board, what we agreed with, what you heard from the board, both for what staff has put together, plus what Ethan has put together, plus this conversation, here's our prioritized order, here's when we think we can do it. And we have another discussion at the next meeting, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Yeah, you have another one?
The only other ones were reducing lot areas required. So this one was a sort of a typo. What I meant to put in that one was basically look at our R1 zone and look at reducing our setback and lot size requirements. And that would potentially open up a few of those maybe larger R1 properties to subdivide into 2 parcels at some point. It's a minimal impact now, but it might be in 10 years, you might get a dozen new units out of that. And then the final 2, one was, so one of the recommendations, and this might be a good discussion point too, was recommendations from the plan was to implement a rental inspection program. And I would agree with staff that I don't think we need to go all the way and do a full rental inspection program for every rental unit. However, I think there is an opportunity here to look at either duplicating or expanding our nuisance hotel ordinance into either adding a nuisance rental units or just call it nuisance lodging, adding into those complaints, property maintenance code complaints that we get for the property that we've inspected and found to be legitimate complaints. And then once a property is placed on our nuisance list, that would then give us the ability and the requirement to conduct regular inspections for code violations on those parcels. until such a time as they're off the list and can verify that they've been cleaned up. So I think that's one that I think is the next step towards giving us, rather than just being complaint-based, but saying, if you're on our nuisance list, then we're going to come do regular inspections and verify that you're meeting all of the code requirements. I think that I think gives a little more teeth to our nuisance hotels, and also we could expand it to our apartment buildings and give us some tools. If we run into some landlords of properties that are not being maintained, we're getting a lot of police and fire traffic too, and property maintenance code complaints, then we could add it to our list and start doing inspections there. But again, not requiring every property to be inspected.
I know staff had comments on, a full program having substantial resource issues. But Ethan's thought on complaint-based system, reasonable. We need help, but yeah.
Yeah, I definitely would need some resources. We don't get many IPMC complaints.
Yeah, I know.
Again, I think this is for me anyway, putting a whole lot of energy into this isn't gonna get us anything.
Again, that's a previous discussion and previous meeting on our website. We had a draft form that we had put on the website prior to adopting the IPMC that said these are only used for data gathering purposes. I know staff's working on a new form, but currently that we've never actually had a property maintenance code violation form that the public was aware of. So if we had that more prominently on our website, shared that in our newsletter, that you could do that. I think if people were more aware that you could file a complaint, they might.
Yeah, I think the broader point from staff is there's a lot of stuff in these documents. I think coming back to us with a prioritized list of what you heard, and then we can discuss that at the next meeting. I think there's some other great ideas that are higher than that, but that's also a good idea. So
I think the nuisance property, that's going to take some focus and time. So, just a discussion that I heard at the counter at the Lancaster police station. This woman was concerned about hearing somebody drilling in the apartment next to her, and she wanted the police to go in there. So it was noise, but everyone has tolerance of noise that is different. And I actually was standing there overhearing this conversation. I was actually felt pretty sorry for the sergeant behind it. I said, really?
yeah, understood. Okay. Any other comments, Ethan?
No, and then the last one was we budgeted $10,000 to look at addressing homelessness. My suggestion is put that out as a request for proposal to our local nonprofit community, churches and nonprofit agencies, to say, do you have a plan that would help address whether that's emergency or transitional housing or services for neighbors in need? And then we could award what we budgeted as a grants, or a series of grants to folks to use.
Thoughts from staff on that? Is that feasible and doable if we did prioritize that?
Yeah, we'd have to write up
the legal guidelines and the process.
Sure. To put it out there, but
I understand that just working in the nonprofit world now. There are several initiatives in the city and low barrier, homeless piece. I think it's a big, Chief's not here now, but when the police have someone they pick up and they're trying to help the person, but they really have nowhere to turn. They've been going to the food hub, downtown, because they had a contract for it there. That's going to transition now to others. The redevelopment authorities looking at it, which used to be the coalition. I put that one lower on the totem pole because we still are working with some of the initiatives that we said with our police department and getting information to
Chief is still working on that program that he talked about. I still need to re-engage with the LIMC municipality to see if we can do something regionally. So unfortunately
I
that.
understand the spirit of it. It's not that much money. That's the problem. Like, when you're running a nonprofit, you have to look at the sweat equity going into looking for 10,000 and writing a grant and then,
I hear you.
I'm just looking at, so recently Manor Township distributed some ARPA funds through basically, and there, it was not a long form that the nonprofits who requested the funding had to fill out. I think it was about a page to say, here's how we use the money. And then the board looked at those and made the awards based off of it. So
How much did they get?
I think they designated, I don't remember how much, it was in the paper, but there was probably a dozen local organizations that got grants.
Okay, so thank you, Ethan. Great job. Thank you, staff. Excellent. If you can just come back with a prioritized list from what you've heard and timelines, and we're happy to move that forward.
great. Thank you.
We have a few members of the planning commission here. I'm not sure why you guys are here, other than you have, it's a Monday night, but well, thanks. Oh, any comments from you guys?
My only comment is, obviously a focus of the housing plan is affordability. So anything the township can do that reduces cost of construction on a development will help with the affordability issue. You're not going to have subsidy to offset rents, so you have to do it through cost. And with current interest rates, that's why Greenfield North is on pause right now. So to do this, any zoning requirements, any density requirements that can look at those things, the C2, as long as you require commercial on the ground floor, so you have that commercial aspect where you provide density, I think that's where you're going to get more units developed. And you're also going to need the political bill for this evening, a townhouse, small house. Multi-family in some of the locations that were their house. It's been up way back.
Thank you, Randy. Great. Yeah, Sarah.
To follow Mike's related to that comment that they're not coming in. They look for what they want to do and they're not coming into us to make changes. I think some of that's the process. And if we make some of these things more accessible, or streamlined, that the opportunity is there with the delays. A lot of time we hear, I don't see.
Yeah.
We hear of the delays, through the process, starting staff, planning commission supervisors. And we can get some of these improvements in. The one thing I was I'm sure planning commission will get to see this and an opportunity. We were given the plan we've got the plan to take a look at it, look at around from everything. So an opportunity to see that. Sure, what your
Commission made a recommendation to adopt the housing plan. So
plan.
Implementation. Yeah.
Specifically tonight, the implementation, the property patient. As it happens, you cherry pick certain things to seem to make the most sense. Yeah. The township's made a lot over the years, the recent years that are in line with some of the recommendations here. So we're ahead of the ball in some things in the township compared to others in the county. But there is room to, there's always room to be better.
Yeah.
Any of these that turn into zoning amendments will have.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd love to get the planning commission feedback on implementation order even before it gets to the point of adoption.
Some of with the inspection that you were talking about towards the end and hotels. To some degree, I think you need a checklist first of specific of what's required. Potentially a first step that maybe you want to look at is a self-inspection report that they have to do themselves, and maybe on a 3-year basis, a third each year. So the workload that they would be required to do a self-inspection of their facility and submit it to township for review, which would make them aware of what the compliance requirements. So, because I'm not sure, I don't know if you ever looked at the restaurant inspections. Some had is I was in about 6 paragraphs. And one of the first things is the person on staff is and I think that may be the case with anything that you look at. So just some assistance for them to self-inspect and say, yes, some will immediately take care of it, others will I'll wait till they talk. Which is what happens here in the restaurants.
Randy, then.
Rental inspections. I do have some experience with rental inspection programs. Be happy to share to staff about it's a challenging system. It really is, and it doesn't pay for itself.
Sure. Alex.
3D zoning alternate. Same experience in rentals, and I've been rentals since prior to the Lancaster, specifically in Lancaster City, prior to them implementing what they do now. And I can tell you, in my own property, in properties I've helped people buy and sell, there's a dramatic difference. And I realize we don't quite have the density that the city does if we don't go to that level, but I think and I realize it creates extra work on the other one side in the building here, but having just the problem properties that continually come up, that every time any one of us drives past, if we were to get a gift certificate to stay at one of these, would you go? That right there is like that's your answer. And so if nothing else, the problem properties, go through and give them away. Say the last room in the corner, but man, that's a no-brainer. That's all.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
Just
Just
believe with the Mill Creek in that village general, does that fit in here anywhere? They talked about the density and the townhouse and the use, and one thing is, maybe I missed it, but not with that, but with this whole discussion is the affordable housing. How does that fit in? We need additional density, additional units. I don't think that we're looking at increasing our density as part of this to give non-single family units higher density to preserve the farm that we've been doing and the infill. But some of this is addressing infill with the accessory dwelling. According to the report, is that it's an issue, and that's going to be a tough. Randy mentioned some as it saves some cost, but it's going to be. I don't know that Mill Creek would be interested in other than private funding they do. And they would be looking at opportunities. But I mean,
two of the big recommendations, staff is, one of the big ones is allowing multifamily in our R2 zone. And then along with that, reducing lot area required for townhouses and multifamily in R2, R3, mixed use, village general, village residential, and Birmingham zoning districts. So that would drop from 3,500 square feet to 2,500 square feet. Townhouses from 3,750 to 3,000. So I think those two right there could have the most significant impact.
Okay. Any other Any other comment from the board or the public? Yeah, CVC, it's friends. No, good, smiling, all good. Okay,
So you're looking for a maybe motion to have staff look at the recommendations and
Right.
That's great. Back solutions to say, we'll accept the recommendations, but bring back a priority separate. I make a motion to accept recommendations as presented and discussed, and for staff to bring back a list of those with priorities of what they think they should address first, second.
Yeah, for the motion made by Ethan, second by Ted. Any other public comment or board comment on the motion? Thanks for all the feedback, by the way. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Great work. Okay, games of skill.
Even saw that the city of Philadelphia, city council passed some legislation to prohibit them in Philadelphia, which has been immediately challenged in court. Staff has taken the position that where we find them in the township, we subject them to the township's amusement tax. It's a device, or they are devices that are not currently regulated by the state, and so we feel they are subject to the township's amusement tax. Candidly, it's been very difficult to get them to apply. So we looked at the current township zoning ordinance, and in general, arcades, which would include games of skill. Although when this was written, I'm not sure the games of skill that we have now were the games of skill that they were talking about then, you know, skeet ball and pinball and that sort of thing. So the ordinance permits arcades in the C2 and C3 zoning districts. And they also permit as an accessory to a non-residential use in all other zones, games of skill, provided there aren't more than 8 of them at any particular location. So we did inquire with the solicitor about the possibility of prohibiting them. Typical lawyer response was, it's going to get appealed, you're going to be in court over it. So we might want to look at making a change to the definition of amusement arcade to address having them in as many places around the township as you can right now, which is essentially anywhere that you have a non-residential use, or anywhere in C2 and C3. So that perhaps could be limited. Of course, you know, we continue to be subject to the planning code, which requires us to provide and allow for all uses somewhere. I think that's a reasonable summary of
So we would need to have to define skee ball and the former games of skill as something else.
That might be one way to approach it. You know, if the board is uncomfortable with having as many as 8 devices at a particular location, you know, that portion of the definition could be removed essentially, so that you basically would allow them only in the C2 and C3 zones. So there might be a number of different ways to try to attack it, depending upon what the board would like to accomplish.
Is there any state legislation pending? I thought I saw the identification of it is one of them, because they're essentially gambling machines, but you know, we're calling them skill games, but there's a payoff. There's machines giving you the slip to reimburse and so forth, and different ways they pay it off and so forth.
There are ongoing discussions and arguments about whether these devices are gambling devices or not. There are court decisions that indicate they are not. And so they are open to local regulation because the state is not currently regulating them.
How many locations do we believe there are these devices? More than 10?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Maybe even more than 20. That'd be.
We have not spent staff time going.
Right.
And
Understood.
really doing
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
research, for them, but yes, I think they're.
There are a lot of gas stations.
Yeah.
A lot of hotel lobbies are adding them to their hotel lobbies. They're in the Brewers Outlet and other places where you can. But yeah, they're popping up, and it's usually a couple. My recommendation would be let's add some additional definitions in the amusement arcade, and then I think limiting games of skill specifically to the C2, C3 zone would be my recommendation. I'm just pulling it from the other zones. And for places that already have those devices prior to the ordinance, if we did pass that, how does that work? Are they grandfathered in?
Yes.
Okay.
And if there's a way to have a requirement that they register so that we can collect the amusement tax, that would also be great.
That'd be great.
There would be some sort of penalty for not registering. That would likely have to be applied to all types of arcade devices, not just, well, it depends on, we'll look at that.
Definition. Yeah. Okay. Other thoughts from the board? Okay. So gave direction to staff to continue to look at games of skill and look at the zoning ordinance. I don't think we need a motion. Okay, let's move on. 8A, ordinance to adopt codification of ordinances. Tara, this is your baby.
It's not done. It's never done, like I said before, but it's gotten to the point where you can adopt the codification of the ordinances. And that said, the zoning ordinance changes they were all teed up, and now we have to change all of the numbers as you're adopting this.
Okay.
But it's a binder.
Yeah, saw it.
So to adopt it, then we'll send yearly all of the changes, or as fast as possible, all of the changes that have occurred, and have it updated, and we will post it on the website.
How long actually have you been working on this? 12 years.
No, I didn't get this when I came on board here. I just got this 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah, because I had been working on it before then.
Okay.
So
It's
finally getting done.
Good clarity. Okay, got it. Okay. Any questions before a motion, before we pass this? Okay, we have a motion.
A motion to approve the ordinance to adopt codification of ordinances as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Ethan, seconded by Mike. Any public comment or board comment? Again, thanks for all the hard work. Yeah. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, 8B, agreement regarding reimbursement of costs for U.S. Women's Open Golf Tournament. We have none to approve.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had hoped that we would have had this and been ready to have it in front of the board tonight. That didn't happen last week, so your next meeting.
Yeah.
No meeting.
Yeah.
Happens, so it's gotta get done by then.
Yeah. And if in case we don't have something, we could probably make a motion to give authority to the township staff under a certain amount, maybe? Up to a certain amount or up to,
I hadn't really given that any thought because I'm
yeah,
planning to have an agreement in front of you.
okay,
Yeah, well, if we get too close to the 20th, we'll have to come up with Plan B.
yeah, okay. Any questions for Hutch regarding the US Open? Please, sir. Okay, 8C, resolution regarding agreement regarding the Manhattan Township compost facility use.
I was contacted by Manhattan Township's township manager and told that they're planning to apply for grant funding for some equipment involved in operating the compost park. And that better in the competition for grant funds, we have agreements.
Yep.
With the municipalities that permit or that they permit to have their residents use the facility. So this agreement was crafted and reviewed by the township solicitor, resolution to adopt it as an intermunicipal agreement. It was prepared by the township solicitor, and I would recommend adoption. Okay.
Sounds good.
Motion to approve the resolution agreement with Manhattan Township compost facility as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mike, second by Roger. Any public comment or board comment? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, we have manager's report.
Yes, and we are very pleased to announce to the board that Lisa Cleveland was hired as the township's first recreation director. She will be starting work Tuesday, the 28th of this month, and she comes to us from where she's been working for a number of years as their executive director of athletics, recreation, and engagement. I think she brings a really good background, education experience, and I'm excited to get that moving program of providing recreation programs to the community.
Great. Welcome you. Thank you. Yeah.
The emergency alert system and notification system. So you each have a flyer that will be made public soon. We were trained on this, Lillian, Jeff, and I were trained on this last week. And so we are testing it internally first before.
We sent it to 17,000.
So we don't hit the launch button unless it says just department heads right now. So, but we are testing it out to make sure that we understand all of the parameters of the system. And then it has already collected known sources of information for numbers in this area, but anyone can sign up for specifically what they want to be told through that system.
I recently signed up for Lancaster City's system. Is it the same software?
It is similar, but it's the same.
Okay. Great. Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you. Any questions for Kara on that? Okay. Accept a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Made by Lucian, second by Roger. Any comment about the motion to adjourn? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?